do we know how to view what life throws at us? How should we actually process the circumstances in our life? When we learn to view our circumstances through the lens of the attributes of God, we begin to make God the focus instead of our situations. If you are interested in learning more about this topic, then stay tuned. I'm Angela with Entrusted with the Journey, so let's get into it. When the promises of God and what we're experiencing in our actual life don't match up, it is so important to cling to the attributes of God. Now, when I'm speaking about the attributes of God, I'm talking about God's nature. I'm speaking to what is God's character according to the scriptures. Now, God has many attributes, but today we'll just focus on the goodness of God. God just doesn't do good things for us. He is the source of all things good. He is the standard of what we even know as goodness. So even if life is challenging and it doesn't make sense, we can have rest and security because we know that God in His goodness will work all things out for our favor. Goodness can be defined as kindness, favor shown, an act of benevolence, compassion, or mercy. Growing up, me and my sisters, we would go to church with my Aunt Lisa. Now, if you know my Aunt Lisa, then you know she loves the Lord, okay? We would sit in church and the pastor would say, God is good, and everybody else in the church would respond all the time. And then he would keep going and he would say, and all the time, and the church would respond, God is good. Now, being a little girl, I did not necessarily understand the weight of what he was sharing and what he was trying to remind his church of. I didn't get that. As I get older, as I've gotten older, I truly realize that God is good. And the way that God has taught me His goodness is honestly through challenges and suffering. And I'm over here like, Lord, if there's any other way that you could teach me about your character, please do. All of the challenges, all of the suffering, I'm like, Lord, please teach me another way. I don't know if you've ever felt that way before, but I feel like this is how God has taught me about His character. Here are a few scriptures that teach about God's goodness. In Exodus 34, the Bible reads, the Lord, merciful and gracious, long-suffering and abounding in goodness and truth. Psalm 25 says, good and upright is the Lord. James 1 says, every good gift and every perfect gift is from above and comes down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or no shadow of turning. Mark 10 says, why do you call me good? Jesus answered, no one is good except God alone. As I mentioned earlier, I feel like God has taught me so much of His character just through different challenges. And so I'll share one with you guys. In 2020, I was pregnant with my son and I was working as a preschool teacher. Most of the world had shut down by this time because of COVID, but my job had not closed and it was still open. When I tell y'all I was angry and frustrated, that is an understatement. Like, I was so mad. I was so upset because I was afraid. I was so scared. There's this disease that's out here literally killing people, and I'm walking outside of my door every single day, putting me and my family at risk, while some of my friends were at home doing whatever they wanted to do, and they could and they should have, making more money than me, you know, with the help of unemployment. And it just bothered me to my core. I felt like, man, God, like, this is so unfair. Like, I'm literally risking my life, and yet I don't really have anything to show for it. So in the classroom that I worked in, we typically would have 20 kids and 2 teachers. The one great thing that I will say about working during that time was that I got to work with literally one of my best friends who made everything so much better. But when I tell you, once the news came that the state that I was living in, everything was to shut down. When I tell you there was 2 kids in my class and 2 teachers, I could have screamed. What we typically would do in a whole day, we finished in about 30 minutes. And then there was the rest of the day for us to work. So I'm tired, I'm pregnant, I am scared, I can't breathe, I have a mask on. And when I tell y'all, I was so angry, it's an understatement, because I was like, what is this mess? To fast forward through the story, I have my son in September. Because of restrictions with COVID, no one is able to be in the delivery room or come and visit us at the hospital because of COVID, which truly I was totally fine with, because it gave me a significant amount of time to be with my son. And I truly am grateful just that we had that time together. So during my whole time off, I had been praying that God would help me and my husband to figure out a way where I could stay home, still some way make some money, but that I would be able to be home with the kids. So my maternity leave was over, and so then I went back to work. I put my son into an in-home daycare, and that was totally fine. The women who were watching my son, they were amazing, and they took great care of him. If you have kids, then you know what it feels like to leave your child with someone. It's a blessing to know that they are safe and they are loved wherever they go. And so that's what we had with my son's in-home daycare, and I was just grateful for that. Something happened with one of the women who was taking care of my son, and she got really sick, and so she was no longer able to work. Once the owner of that organization realized that this woman who was watching my son is no longer going to be able to work, they did not have enough staff to have as many children as they had, because you have to stay within a certain ratio in order to legally watch children. Okay. We were one of the families who had to let go because we were one of the last ones to sign up for those spots at the daycare. When I tell y'all, I was just like, okay, Lord, it is one thing after another during this COVID season. It's bad enough that I'm out here. Now I'm out here trying to do what's right. And now my son doesn't have childcare anymore. When I tell you, it is the worst feeling to be out and about taking care of other people's kids when you know that your own child won't be taken care of. It's hard, right? Like, it's hard to even make that make sense. Like, how am I out here taking care of other folks' kids, which that's my job and I'm going to do it and I'm going to do it well. But a part of me was just like, but my own kids are not even being taken care of. Like, I literally am taking care of somebody else's kids and my kid doesn't have anywhere to go. So now I'm in the process of looking for new childcare for my son. And I promise you, everywhere I go, they say that there's a wait list and it's full to the next year, or it's out of our price range. And so it felt like nothing was working out. And so I go to my boss and I tell her, I'm like, hey, so I have literally been looking for childcare for my son, and it's all wait lists. And so everywhere I went, there was a wait list. So the place where I worked was a preschool with childcare provided, meaning that once the curriculum was done for the day, then you would just consider that like daycare. And so we worked with children from infant all the way to elementary school age. And so I asked my boss, I said, is there any way that you could help us out until I'm able to either get my son into one of these schools where there's a wait list, or we can figure something else out? And she told me, she said, we are not able to help you in that way, but let us know if you figure something out. And so I was just like, oh my gosh, like I literally have been working here for 9 or 10 years. I can't remember, but for a really long time, and you guys can't help me work this thing out. And so I was so hurt. I was so just like devastated, because I was like, all right, y'all, I've literally worked here for this amount of time, and we just need help right now. It won't be forever, but we need help right now. And she wasn't able to help, which was extremely hurtful. I had asked, friends from church. I asked just some other people who I knew, but nothing was working out. And so when I tell you, I was just like, okay, all right, God, like, I am not sure what else I can do. So I just go, once I figured out, okay, like I have exhausted all of my options. I went to my boss as like a last resort again, and I said, okay, so if I don't find childcare for my son, I'm going to have to put in my 2 weeks, because he doesn't have anyone to watch him. And so it was interesting, her response, because it hadn't changed. She still said, no, we don't have a spot available for your son. And so we really do hope that you can stay with us. And in my mind, I was like, ma'am, I am not going to be able to stay with you. My son does not have childcare. I'm not going to be here watching somebody else's kids. I'm going to be at home with my son and my daughter, and I will watch them, right? Because I'm their mom. Like, what kind of sense does that make for me to be out here taking care of other people's children and my own kids are not taken care of? And so, yeah, that's what happened. The time came for me to put my 2 weeks in. I handed in my 2 weeks notice, and that was that. During that 2 week time frame, I really felt God was saying to me, Angela, don't worry. Angela, I'm going to take care of you. Everything seems so uncertain. I'm going to take care of you. Just finish well. Right? Like, I knew God was like, girl, I know you tempted to show out and just go off. Don't go off. Right? And so I listened and I obeyed what God was saying to me, and I finished well. I made sure, like, okay, so if there's anybody who needs any kind of help, needs me to do anything, I'm here. I'm going to serve. I'm going to give. I'm going to love upon these kids who are still here at the school. And I'm going to give my absolute best, and I am going to finish well. So my last day came around, and it was bittersweet. It really was. It was bittersweet. And so I bought pizza for everybody who works there, and I said my goodbyes, and then that was my last day. I would love to learn more about your walks and your journey. If there is any way that God has been good to you and his attribute of being good has shown up in your life, I would love to hear from you. Please type down in the comments how God has been good to you. So what did all of that even have to do with the goodness of God? Well, I just want you guys to know that literally everything that happened in that story from beginning to end, God was involved in all of the details. He was working out everything for my favor. I did make some mistakes along the way. The biggest mistake that I made was not looking to God. I was looking at people. I was looking at my situation. I was trying to fix it all on my own instead of truly trusting that God was going to work it all out. Now, on the other side of that whole story, I can sit back and say, I am sitting in an answered prayer. I prayed during that time that I would be able to stay home with my kids and that I would be able to somehow make money from home with my kids here with me. And I can say that, so now what I'm doing for work is I do social media marketing and virtual assisting. God answered my prayer. Now, there were challenges along the way, and was not always faithful that, oh, God is going to work it out for my good and it's going to be great. But I can tell you that he did work it out. And that's not to say that this was an overnight process or that I didn't still have other things that were challenging in my life, because I did. But what I can say is, through this situation, it's just adding on to God's track record of showing up for me in my life. If this was encouraging to you in any way, please like. If you're not already subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe. All right.